The door was open. Oh, hello, Philip. Darling, I want you to meet Mr. Philip Adams. This is my wife.
How do you do?
How do you do? And my sister-in-law, Miss Anna Calman.
How do you do?
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for our show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. So I'm joined by Marshall Sandman, who is the host of What to Do with Marshall, an Instagram Live interview series that features celebrities on how to optimize time spent during the pandemic. Now, previously, he was the director of corporate strategy at Warner Media, and before that, he was an investment banker at Goldman Sachs and Jordan Eniston Group. So I want to welcome Marshall.
Scott, thank you so much for having me. I guess this will air on a different day, but happy Friday.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's kind of get into the pressure cooker environment that, in particularly Harlem, New York, was at the kind of the height of the COVID-19 lockdown. It's not like other parts of the country or other parts of the world where people have a lot of space. When you're living in a very densely populated urban setting, it's difficult to go out, and sometimes your living space is just a tiny little, studio or one bedroom. So can you talk about what was kind of the mental health state of the people sheltering at home, specifically in Harlem, in New York, in the kind of March, April timeframe?
Sure. I'll caveat this by saying that I, was fortunate enough to leave in March, but left my work behind, left this great nonprofit back in Harlem. So was super, super connected with the community as soon as I left. To answer your question, Harlem, New York as a whole was the second epicenter of this disease. So you went from people talking about Wuhan and the focus of the disease being in China directly to New York City. And so within the context of the 5 boroughs, Harlem is one that demonstrates one of the biggest wealth gaps of the 5 boroughs, kind of between Queens, the Bronx, and Harlem, as opposed to regular sort of downtown Manhattan. So these, I would say, there are a lot of service workers. There are a lot of people that were put out of work immediately furloughed, whether those were restaurant workers, general food service workers, and everyone's sort of right outside of that healthcare industry. And you made a really good point of these are people that are not going back to places with yards or even 1,000 square feet, and sometimes not even 500 square feet. So sitting inside and in the heat in that environment is tough and frustrating. And when people are filing for unemployment in a place that has the highest density of wealth in America, but also one of the highest densities of poor people in America, it's really, really hard. And that's why, for me, I was really focused as soon as I got home to where I grew up in North Carolina on turning around and figuring out how to help. The sort of immediate effects, obviously, being, you think about the people that are unemployed. But for me, I thought, what about the kids that aren't in school anymore? Those are kids that, for me, I've been a part of, working with Harlem Grown for as long as I've been in New York for the last 6 or 7 years. Those are kids that I've seen come into the program after school at about 3:00. That place no longer exists. And I hear a lot of days about what their meal was at school and what their food stamps provided to them. That program immediately disappeared. There's no infrastructure for those schools to continue to provide meals to that same group of kids and that same demographic, much less to their parents, who work 2, 3, and sometimes 4 or 5 jobs. So Harlem Grown as an organization pivoted really fast, and I can't say that I should not take any credit for that. I can only take some credit for raising a little bit of money towards helping the pivot happen a little bit faster. But we're not a food service provider. That's not the business that we've ever been in. We opened our doors in our first urban farm in 2011. We're at 3 urban farms now, but never were we someone that had hundreds of people show up looking for food. So we just kind of had that relationship with the at-risk community to say, okay, we know who the people are that need food. Let's figure out a way to get it to them. So we've raised in excess of $100,000 since the beginning of COVID, just providing meals to not only those kids, but to those kids as parents. And it's not just directly from wholesale food service providers, but it's also supporting our general economy in Harlem. So it's going out to small restaurants and making sure that some of the small restaurants that we have loved and have been supporting as patrons in that community for forever have an opportunity to continue to exist. I think I saw a stat in the New York Times yesterday that said that within New York City, they expect 85% of independent restaurants to close. That's staggering for people that spend, all that extra money and excess money on rent, really just to have access to that great food. I'm one of those people that considers themselves to be a foodie. It's devastating. And I can only imagine being an entrepreneur in the restaurant space and thinking, how am I going to pick myself back up off the mat and go back into that business again, knowing that, all the cards are stacked against me.
Yeah, well, I want to thank you for explaining about Harlem Grown and the kind of work that you guys were doing. And clearly, you're very passionate about this space. For today's interview, we're really talking about spilling the Quarantea, which has been rebranded as What to Do with Marshall. When and why did you decide that this was an outlet that you wanted to spearhead?
Sure. And quickly, we started with spilling the Quarantea because I think that spilling, the name was supposed to sort of emit and create this emotion of we're all in this together, and it is universally sucked to have your life put on pause, and whether you're someone that has been super focused on innovation for your entire career, and a lot of people haven't been. A lot of people that's not their ability is not to make themselves uncomfortable. They don't have the same talent, and so they. I like spilling the Quarantea because it's kind of a cute way of demonstrating that we're all in one boat. As the social protests and the death of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor came to the forefront of everybody's mind, and I continued to have wonderful guests that wanted to come on and share their story with me, I wanted to pivot to something that was just a little bit less light sounding on the front end. And as long as I continue to have great guests come on to talk about different social justice movements, different things that are not just fun and light and celebrity gossip, I'm going to continue to do so. I did not answer your question at all. So I chose the Instagram Live platform for a couple of reasons. One, as someone that's been in the media space, I understand what creators need to do to get to reach their audience. And for me, the biggest thing was I want to interact with people immediately. I think that the Instagram Live platform certainly has its flaws, and it's one that's really developed during this time. I think that people that never used Instagram, that got an Instagram during quarantine, now know what Instagram Live is and understand the concept of seeing their favorite celebrity go live, or a musician play music in their living room and request a song and really interact with them. So that's why I chose Instagram Live. There are other formats that do it a little bit. Twitter has a live feature, YouTube has a live feature, but really the transience of Instagram, I can hop in for just a second, I can hop out just for a second and see what's going on, really provided all the different dynamics I was looking for. And I have to say that the platform has improved a lot. It has a long way to go, and I think I've improved as an interviewer a lot and still have a long way to go.
Yeah, it's an interesting rationale in terms of why you selected Instagram Live. And the reason is, I think you're talking about something that I think very few outside of, let's say, media and marketing really understand and appreciate, which is that part of marketing these days have fundamentally shifted away from, kind of that monologue approach. We're just going to put something out and hope that it catches on fire. Here, what you're talking about is this notion of real-time, two-way engagement and interaction, which I think is really not only timely for in this context that we're talking about, but from a brand perspective, that's really the way that I think the millennials and especially the Gen Zs want to be communicated with and to, correct?
That's a really, really good point. I think that my generation and sort of younger, I'm 28 years old, we expect to have a two-way dialogue with the celebrities in our life. We want to hear from them. We want to see that they repost our Instagram stories and we want to see them comment and share and react to what we're saying, because we all have these sort of shared experiences, and it's definitely a novel feeling. And I think that Instagram is the first platform that's provided that real opportunity for fans to actually connect in that sort of two-way dialogue. And you made the second point, which might have been buried a little bit, which is brands love this, right? Brands love knowing what type of interaction and what level of engagement different celebrities and people that they might use to promote their products and services have with their fans. Because someone, a model on Instagram might have 5 million followers, but when she goes to post something about Quip, the toothbrush brand, maybe only a couple thousand people engage with it. Maybe they're not coming to her content for that reason. They would rather see her style, for example. There are other people with just a few thousand followers that whenever they post anything, every 60-70% of their fans want to know what they're doing and go out and at least consider buying that product or using that discount code. So it's a totally new way for brands to kind of step into that ecosystem in a way that they can really understand the attribution and in that way be able to redistribute their marketing dollars in a smart way, especially in an environment like we're in now, where marketing dollars are really, really hard to come by.
Yeah, really, absolutely on point, really, especially in the bigger backdrop of Facebook and Instagram, where brands are choosing to not to participate in their advertisement network. Let's talk a little bit about another dimension, which is that whether it's Instagram Live or something comparable, this is a raw, kind of an unedited access to fairly well-known influencers and celebrities. Tell me both from the celebrity perspective, but also the audience in terms of how they're receiving it, and how is this different from, let's say, a polished TV interview that typically these celebrities are doing?
And I hope this doesn't sound boastful. My whole concept of doing it this way was to demonstrate that I had an ability to relate to all sorts of different people. So I have had Black small business owners on to talk about social activism in their community and using their platform. I've had Bravo celebrities or celebrities from the Bravo network come on and tell me that they are no longer drinking because they were making a fool of themselves on a show that they were on for several seasons. All the way to comedians who some have been kind of sad and have kind of come to the show with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder because their livelihood has been taken away during COVID, and Instagram Live is not a way that they have been able to engage in a way that they're actually kind of paying, in a way that's able to help them pay their rent. So I would say it is really, really nice for people to get to engage with something that feels unscripted, that feels like a real conversation, and really helps. And I view myself as someone that stands in place of kind of like the conscience of the conversation, so that I'm really asking the questions that people at home want to know.
Yeah, it's really actually very powerful what you're doing, because so many times I think, especially the younger generation, Gen Zs, are super savvy, and they could sniff out something that's scripted, something that is brand sponsor from a mile away. And here, what you're offering is a platform, an exchange that is unfiltered on both sides. And it's allowing for human connection to happen regardless of socioeconomic status or gaps, let's say. And that makes that content even more digestible and relatable from a storytelling perspective, right?
I think it definitely does. And there's a lot of people, as you know, there's a lot of people that have come to this Instagram Live platform, and whether it's Instagram or they're going to TikTok, and brands are trying to integrate some way into that ecosystem to create a relationship with the fans. I've had some relationship with brands. Talenti was a really unbelievable supporter for the first several dozen episodes of my show and donated a tremendous amount of money to Harlem Grown. But because I'm not taking any money out of this ecosystem, I can have the conversations however I want. I can, if I have a great brand partner for a couple of weeks, that's great. And I love that. And they're going to donate to a really wonderful cause. But if they don't, I still have people watching and donating. So it's not really important to me to make it scripted or to have it feel polished, because I want to have the most raw conversation, even if it's not totally politically correct.
Yeah. So I want to talk about something that's really very timely and very powerful, actually, is that we're starting to see the real potential power of the youth in terms of activism, and we're starting to see that through TikTok, where they are, getting involved with certain political messages. And certainly what you're doing also has a huge kind of activism component, social impact component, certainly with the nonprofit Harlem Grown and so forth. How are you looking to kind of drive or direct the conversations specific to climate change and sustainability?
Sure. First of all, we have our planet is our number one resource, and I think that a lot of times while we can get caught up in different active and really important social movements, that's why I loved Harlem Grown to begin with, because it's really the intersection of a lot of things. So before COVID, if we were catching up to do your podcast a year ago, we would only be talking about how important it was to be sustainable and to make those little changes in your everyday life that reduce waste and reduce carbon emissions. But now we're talking about Harlem Grown in a totally different context, right? We're talking about people who have been 100% affected by COVID, who are not in school, who are unemployed, who don't have food in front of them, but are also the same BIPOC community that really benefit from a light being shed on the problems and the systemic racism that's kind of plagued the Harlem community for 100 years or more. I'm not answering your question, but I think that our youth and now have that extra energy to continue to focus, and we don't get fatigued in the same way that generations before us sometimes have, which is that we can focus on something for a few weeks, we can think about social justice for a few weeks, and then we put it away. For me, I know that I'll focus on social justice as often as people will come onto my show to talk about it, and I am continuing to focus on it. I'm in the next couple of weeks talking to women of color who are small business owners and leaders in our community, and going to talk to them about what it's been like leading their businesses and having employees throughout this time. And then I'll transition, and October and November will come around, and God bless us if we don't go out and vote and put our pen to paper and punch Joe Biden's name, and kind of at least take that one teeny tiny silver lining from this entire COVID process, which is that Donald Trump is polling at like worse than Jimmy Carter era polling numbers, that Joe Biden's going to go win 50 states. We're going to be super happy about it, and there'll be one day of celebration coming. So I guess to answer your question, it's a level of energy that I think has never been brought, and it's never been communicated, right? We can all communicate. We can all share this experience together. And it doesn't feel as disjointed across our country as maybe as it used to.
Yeah, it's a really powerful point that you bring up, which is that I think, the older generation, and me included, we're guilty of being kind of topically oriented, where certain trends, social cause trends, come and go. For example, a few years back, it was a Me Too movement. Now it's BLM. But then, it becomes passé and we move on to something else. Gun control was important, a couple of years ago, but not as much. So what you're saying is that, especially the youth and the platform that's available, there's this notion of sustained effort, that activism is prolonged and continuous and further focused, which is really what's needed to make transformative changes happen on a societal level. So I think that's really, really fascinating.
I think that the last point I'll make there is Hamilton came out on Disney Plus. I don't know if you have Disney Plus. I know you have kids, so you probably have Disney Plus. And Hamilton, when it came out several years ago, reflected this American concept of triumphalism. Like we are somehow post racism in our country, and this is this Obama era wonderful thing that we can all share in together across races and across genders and across sexualities, and it's something to bring us all together to the real message of America. And Hamilton comes out on Disney Plus, and let me start by saying it's excellent. It's probably the best Broadway to film adaptation I've ever seen in my life, because it really it does a good job of capturing what the onstage feeling. But people have taken a second to step back and say, is American triumphalism really something that we should ever feel? I think we should always be battling to be a little bit better. And I'm someone that has benefited from a tremendous amount of white privilege in my life, and I continue to try and give back and check my privilege at the door. And that's something that I was guilty of when Hamilton came out. I felt that way when Hamilton came out. Like, what a wonderful world that we're living in today. So I hope that we can all just take this moment to reflect upon and sort of just stay in it and remember how this feels right now to be introspective and try to be better.
That's a very empowering message. Thank you for that. Let me ask you a very personal question, and I think I tried to preface it before the meeting that I will ask you a tough question, which is, clearly you're a driven person. You are, I think, a junior board on the American Cancer Society, junior partner of a public theater. You worked at Goldman Sachs. How do you reconcile what you're doing in terms of a not-for-profit platform that you're building with where your career is going to go?
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, yes to all those things. I have helped raise over $1 million for the American Cancer Society. I love the public theater. That's just a passion. It's a good question. I think that the reality for me is that I hope that this creates the right connection for the next big chapter of my career. I'm very fortunate during this time to have worked every day, multiple things, from working in investment banking at Goldman Sachs to side hustling and writing my own TV script and working with production companies to get it sold. I'm someone that never really puts the pen down on multiple things that I'm doing. And I think that the next step of my career is probably somewhere in the venture area or in the search fund area, where I'm either going to go run a business on my own, or join up with some venture capitalists like yourself for kind of the next step. But I'm not sure, and I'm not overly worried. I'm working really, really hard at this, and I'm working really, really hard at some smaller side projects, and the right thing will come up because it eventually does. And I think that I'm gonna brag on you a little bit. You talk about it you talked about it in a couple of your TED Talks. Like, it's not about 10,000 hours in one thing, and it's not about building a habit, because a lot of people can do those things and still not be successful. It's about continuing to wake up and ask yourself what makes you uncomfortable and then doing that thing. And I battle to do that every day, and I have really wonderful parents that have helped me to kind of support me in that sometimes when it isn't financially viable.
Well, I have to say, Marshall, I'm super inspired. Very, very inspired. There's a platform called Human IPO that I'm got myself involved with. And, I think it's an important concept because I think our value changes over time. And it's not about our salary income that I'm talking about, but this value that we provide over time and cumulatively to society, and it gets quantified in different ways. And I just feel like I'm just privileged to be part of your journey in your process. So thank you very much. How can people learn more about what to do with Marshall?
Just follow on Instagram, and you can also follow my Twitter. But my Instagram is @whattodowithmarshall. That's got 2 L's on the end. And come watch a couple of shows. Comment. Donate to Harlem Grown. And I'm happy to accept or find a way to accept donations to Harlem Grown in any way, whether you're a restaurateur or a wholesale food service provider, or there's something educational that you want to provide. I have been super dynamic during this time to help kind of bring different resources to the charity and to these kids and their families. So please reach out. I'm trying to make myself super available to everybody. And Scott, I hope that you'll come on What to Do with Marshall.
Of course. So with that, I've been joined by Marshall Sandman, who is the host of What to Do with Marshall. Thank you for joining today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.